All right, so tonight's webinar, we're going to look at coaching and sort of moving from feedback to feed forward, and really trying to look at ways to approach feedback, that kind of component of our training wheel and that component of the learning and teaching process, with more of a solution-based approach. And so we're going to look at some genuine kind of ideas that will help hopefully shift that lens and focus on coaching and teaching that's based on what we would like to see in the future rather than what we are currently seeing now. And that's sort of the foundation, I guess, for this sort of solution-based approach to feedback. So we're going to start with the goal. The goal really is to, hopefully from this afternoon, walk away with some tools and strategies to have more impactful lessons. How genuine skill development through improved analysis and then improved solution findings. So a lot of what we do as coaches and educators is we present information, we show that technique, and then it's up to your students to learn that and give that a try. But beyond that initial presentation of information, a lot of that coaching and that development of the lesson from that point really is based on the analysis and the feedback from the coach. And we'll also get into it a little bit in that we want to try and bring the student into that solution finding. So the goal really is to create more impactful lessons through stronger skill development, better analysis, and better solution finding. And the outcome of that solution finding will be more positive, more future focused, but often more accurate and more detailed and more relevant feedback. So tonight we're going to one of the goals is also to sort of sharpen our eye for technique and work on our analysis. And we're going to try and spend some time doing that tonight. I have prepared a few videos for us to sort of use as demonstrations to kind of practice that. But a lot of tonight will really be about the talking part of analysis and feedback. So I think the analysis part is everything that happens in your head, in your brain when you're watching your students, and then the feedback is everything you say to your students. So mostly tonight we'll kind of focus on that, but hopefully we can tick both boxes and work on our analysis and our feedback and our solution focused feedback. So really it's just time to reduce those old feedback habits, and a lot of them are ingrained in really human behavior. So let's crack into it a little bit. From feedback to feed forward. So why problem-focused coaching falls short? So it's nice anytime we try and make a change, whether it's in our writing or our coaching, to understand how do we currently do things, or what are some traditional ways of doing things, and then some pros and cons from there, and what are some adjustments we'd like to make in the future. So when I think of a lot of coaches that I'm training, instructors that I'm training, I even saw it today on the snow with some of the evaluators I was working with in Cassie today. Traditional feedback centers around past errors, and one question I just wanted to ask the group quickly is why do we think that is? Why does traditional feedback, or feedback that's maybe not very well designed, or feedback that is reactive, why does it tend to focus on the, quote unquote, the error of the student? Any initial thoughts on that? Feel free to just tap away on the keyboard or just unmute and shout it out. I'm going to have to delegate someone. Too many YouTube how-to videos? Yeah. Traditional way of how we educate, yeah. So a lot of it can become from almost subconscious, like how we're brought up in school, how our teachers taught us at school, even at university. Traditionally, we are wired to learn from our mistakes. That's a nice one from Jordan. But I like what Abby says here, and I think that's the common one, is often it's very easy to see the error or the flaw or the deficiency. Sometimes it's subtle and it's harder to see, for sure, and we can talk about that later on with the higher ability levels. But a lot of the time it's because you see it, and what you see, you say. So the classic scenario is the rider has their weight a little bit too far back into the corner, their arms are straight, and rather than discussing and talking about the solution, we tend to sort of blurt out the thing that we see. So, hey, your weight's a little bit back, or you're a little bit too stiff, or let's try and, you're pulling on the bars for a front wheel lift, for example. So we tend to say what we see, and in that sense, it's very organic, it's very natural, and also our brain is hardwired to do that through evolution, through society. If we see a problem, we highlight that straight away. Like, there is a lion, run. We don't tend to sort of think about the solution too much. We just tell people, what is the risk? What is the danger? What's the thing that's wrong right now? So we can't be too harsh on that in some ways, because it's hard to break these habits. But essentially, it's good to understand why they happen. It's easier to see it, and then as soon as we see it, we tend to say it without necessarily kind of thinking about it any more than we could be. So the outcome of that is it anchors riders to mistakes instead of improvements. And I think we've come a long way in coaching in general, that we all understand that feedback needs to try and be positive. And we understand why, and there's plenty of sports science and studies behind that positive feedback drives higher performance. But often I think too, one of the challenges that we get with this problem-focused feedback is that it can be overly corrective, because especially for newer riders, sometimes they're doing so many different things. And we tend to start seeing all of the symptoms when in actual reality there's often sort of one fundamental root cause of that symptom. And so if we kind of just pause before we say what we see, that's another tool that we have to try and avoid this overly corrective feedback, where we're just highlighting all the things that need to be fixed or changed, or that they're, quote unquote, they're doing wrong. So mentally, this is a huge challenge for our students, because it really gives a good whack, a good punch to their confidence. And we all know that confidence is a huge asset when it comes to a student learning a new skill, especially a new skill when there's perceived risk, like in mountain biking. If you're learning, there's even studies on confidence when people are learning puzzles in a room. No personal risk, but they still have, confidence can still inhibit their learning process, because there's self-worth, there's the opinions of others, there's all these other things that will be going through that learner's mind, and they'll be thinking about when it comes to learning a new task. And so confidence can be something that will help a learner in essentially a safe environment. And when you add to that in mountain biking, we've got physical, very real risk, then that's compounded even further. So good research out there. Next step guidance drives learning, and error-focused feedback tends to hinder performance. So just a quick summary there of what feedback is. And I've never really thought about it until last year, and in terms of the word feedback. And inherently, if you think of that word and you break that down, we're feeding information about what happened in the past, hence feedback. So without realizing it, just the label that we've chosen to describe the teaching behavior, it's setting us up for failure, because it's without, knowingly or unknowingly, we're sitting there or standing there feedback, it's gonna sort of program or pre-program us to be focused on what they're doing wrong and what happened in the past rather than the future, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So just quickly, describe the last piece of feedback you had, and whether that's a biking thing, maybe it's a ski thing or a different sport, maybe it's at work, but if you're comfortable, just share with the group what was the last piece of feedback you had, and whether it was constructive, whether it was solution focused, or whether they tended to just highlight all of the problems, all of the areas of weakness. Like, it would be good just to kind of get a feel for the room and see if any. I had feedback today, so maybe whilst you're tapping away and thinking about your feedback, I was presenting to a group of peers today, and my feedback was pretty direct, but it was more solution focused. Actually, I started off a little more intrinsic and getting my students to feel things first, and then the feedback was, for certain students, we might want to pinpoint it and get specific earlier, which is funny because that's what I tell coaches all the time to do, and I felt like I was getting my own feedback. But the way Adam delivered it, it was very concise, very direct, but it really was solution focused. It was, essentially the language was, next time try this. Feedback I was given focused on the problems. Right. Yeah, so Brenda's sharing that the last feedback she had was definitely a bit more problem focused, and it shut you down. The habit of trying to immediately correct what we see. So that's a key thing. It's easier to see the problem and identify the cause solution. Any other stories there to share from just feedback that you've heard recently, whether it was good or bad or medium? So this would be my first takeaway for you all as coaches, is try and get yourselves into more situations where you're getting more feedback. And how can you do that if you're the most experienced coach in the area or there aren't other coaches? Use your students. So good coaching is two-way collaboration. And whether it's kids, adults, beginner, intermediate, advanced, a good coach can kind of create that connection and create that, in a way, I like to humanize myself in front of my peers and my students and my mentors so that I can make mistakes. And when I'm making a mistake and I'm asking for feedback, it just makes that whole process a lot easier for my student to go through the same thing. So especially if I have new clients, that's something I'm really aware of, is I'll share what I'm working on, I'm share what I'm struggling with, I might share with some feedback I've had recently. I'll even ask them, you're following me, how's my writing looking? Like, am I doing that thing I'm asking you to do? And it doesn't really matter how accurate or precise their feedback is, but now we've just opened up that door to A, receive some feedback ourselves and experience that ourselves, but B, hopefully for our student, they're more open to that feedback as well. Sound good? Any questions so far? All good? Feel free to use the little emojis. Okay. Brenda won the race there. Well done, Brenda. All right. So from feedback to feed forward. So moving on. Moving beyond positive sandwiches and why writers need clear, detailed information. So the other side to feedback too is I feel like we can get into a habit with positive feedback of, in a way, making it a bit too fluffy, a bit too broad. And we mean well. And I think feedback and delivering feedback in a solution-based approach is a skill that for me matches something like stability and balance on a bike. Like, this is really a huge area of your coaching that you can continuously refine. And if you do a quick Google search on different types of feedback, you'll quickly see lots of different models for summative feedback, formative feedback, descriptive, prescriptive. There's all these kind of different feedback models, question-based feedback, visual feedback. So really, you know, today we're kind of scratching on the surface, and hopefully one of the outcomes for today is to highlight just how much more you can learn about feedback as a system. And there's so many different layers and different tools, different strategies, different approaches. And like a lot of this stuff, it's not necessarily right or wrong, but the more I can educate myself about different feedback approaches, the more I can then pick the right tool for the right scenario. And then it becomes about when am I more direct? When am I more sandwich-based? When am I more formative? When am I summative, descriptive, prescriptive? You can then have that higher awareness as a coach. So I think there's pros and cons to sandwiches. And I think we all know the sandwich, but one of the traps people fall into is it can blur the message. And I see this a lot, especially in camps that really prioritize sometimes they over prioritize the social element of the camp to the point where a lot of the feedback is overly positive. And in doing that, it's also often very vague, and it can often end up creating a false sense of achievement, which in some outcomes is really positive and really useful depending on the client base, the experience level, and the outcome that you want for the camp. But I've also seen it backfire where people, students can get a conflated level of self-assessment. They've got so much pumping up and so much positive feedback, suddenly they think they're a lot better than they are. And so there's concerns with that too, right? So we want to use feedback in a way that maintains confidence, builds reassurance, builds positivity, but doesn't do it to the point where now people get in over their heads because they've had so much love and so many high fives and hugs. So that's fantastic. They're feeling awesome. Now they try and do this drop because they feel like Superman or Superwoman. And that's fantastic, but it doesn't actually end up with the outcome that we're looking for. So often that happens because the positive sandwich can kind of blur the core message. The other side to it is they'll anticipate the criticism. Like they get the good stuff. Oh, you're looking good. I really liked your flow down there, good pace. And like, as you're saying those positive elements, they're almost anticipating the next bit. And it's quite easy for the brain to just tune out from that bit because they feel good when you tell them the good stuff, and then they don't feel as good when you tell them the other stuff. So it's quite easy. Like, if I know there's a sandwich going, I'm going to listen. I'll kind of listen to the middle bit, and then I'll listen again to the end bit. So it's amazing how that can backfire sometimes. So it can create dependence on reassurance. And this is something I've seen in kids. I've seen in lots of different adults. If the feedback is too positive, especially with the sandwich approach, I've seen this a lot traditionally in the winter world too, is whether I'm training an instructor, a coach, or just an athlete or a recreational rider, they become overly reliant on this positive feedback. How am I doing? Am I doing well? Is it good enough? And that creates two outcomes. One is a rider that looks for external praise or to feel good on the bike or to feel good on the board or whatever the activity it is. Intrinsic motivation is a key pathway to sustainable progression with any rider or athlete. A great way to build intrinsic motivation is to not create dependence on positive feedback from an external source. So especially at the higher levels of coach education and athlete development, there needs to be a collaboration in there, and whoever the human is, whether they're an athlete, a coach, or a rider, the intrinsic motivation is key, because if they are proud of themselves for an achievement, They don't need any external praise. And they'll often, the outcome of that is they'll be a lot more open to meaningful, actionable, direct feedback. And they don't actually want the fluff, because they, at that point, they know that the fluff is there for, and it's not necessarily there for the job at hand, which is to change the skill or change the movement pattern or to feel something different. Does that make sense? Just checking on that. That all good? Okay, cool. Big time. Okay, nice. I like that. So the other side of the positive feedback is sometimes it's quite easy, and I'm guilty of this too, by the way. So all of the stuff that I'm talking about, I've been there and I've done it. I've felt the pros of it and the cons of it. I've done it too much. I've done it at the wrong time. So again, it's not about right or wrong. It's just awareness of, when is this style of feedback I'm choosing, is this helping or hindering my coaching situation that I have in front of me? The downside of the fluffy feedback is it's often vague, because it's easy to be vague. And so one of my caveats, like if you're going to do the sandwich, the positive to try, and you're going to have some kind of constructive feedback within a sandwich model, it's what was good. You're looking good coming into that corner. I really like the way you turned out and you made it wide to carry better speed. Awesome job. Because that's not fluffy. That's, you know, and there's science behind this too. Like, positive feedback works if it's specific, because that will remind them to repeat it. But if the positive feedback is really fluffy, there's no technical advantage to it, because now I don't have that reminder to keep doing it, which means I may not actually even know that I'm doing it. Like, how many times have you guys done something on a bike or something and you didn't even realize you were doing it, or you didn't realize you were doing it too late or too small or too much or too early? It was somebody reminding you of that and telling you that. So positive feedback, if it's specific, can really help accelerate the progression, but also reduce regression, because a lot of riding is trial and error. And if you're not told to keep doing something that you're doing well, it's quite reasonable for you to maybe just be like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. I'm going to try something else now. But if a coach was there to step in and say, no, that what you did there was awesome, please keep doing that. I was coached for six weeks, pretty high level snowboarding for my level 4 exams. And a lot of the feedback I got from my coach, and he's a good friend of mine and very lucky to have him in my pocket. But one of his feedback styles was, as soon as I did something correct, he just said, focus in on that and just do that for the next hour and nothing else. And then as soon as you can't do it, go home. So most of my coaching in those 6 weeks, and I went from like an average hard boot Harbour snowboarder to a pretty high level, to pass the level 4 exams in 6 weeks. And that was a perfect example of specific positive feedback and pretty much nothing else. Because I definitely did have confidence issues and self-doubt. So that was a really cool experience for me to go through. So slight sidebar there as I remember that story, but let's get back to it. So detailed info improves motor skill acquisition. So that's the other reason why we want specific feedback, because there's all sorts of things out there, reinvestment models and some fantastic information out there. But when we're learning movement patterns in particular, the fewer words we can use, the more simple we can make that explanation, the easier it is for the brain to essentially process that information and turn it into a physical movement. And that's where the fluffy stuff, the vague stuff, really doesn't have any value from a technical standpoint. It definitely might have some value from a mental standpoint. And that's where sometimes we have to weigh up our feedback. do I need to approach the feedback to help my students' mental state right now, or do I need to approach it to really focus in on a technical piece of their writing right now? And there isn't a hard right or wrong. It's just you as a coach reading the situation, and you know what? I'm just going to give them some vague, fluffy stuff to make them feel better, because right now I think it's the mental side that's holding them back more than the technical side. Cool. So just a little thought question for you all is, with that in mind, is when do you prefer the fluffy stuff versus the specific direct stuff? Like if you internalize that for a minute, maybe reflect back, when were some times where maybe you got really technical feedback, but actually all you wanted was just someone to say, hey, you're doing fantastic, right? And vice versa. When was someone sort of trying to make you feel good, but you just didn't care? You just wanted the meat and potatoes of it, and just tell me what to do so I can get better. If you're comfortable, share some stories. It's always good to hear what you've been through. When it's related to my effort, that's kind of cool. Maybe Patrick, if you can expand on that quickly, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, sure. So if I'm working on something, and say I'm working with you, Paul, and you've kind of given me some pointers on things that I can do in a positive way, and I'm out there and I'm trying it, and you're seeing it, and you can see that I'm really focused on that. That's kind of nice to hear that someone's noticing, just that someone's focused and trying their best. I think people like that, where you don't need to tell me what you just told me a minute ago that I should be working on. You just told me that, so now it's the next thing. Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, and that's something, when you talk about when and how much, that phrase applies to different feedback approaches all the time. Often I see coaches and instructors that can use these different feedback models quite well. Sometimes they do it without realizing, but they tend to use one of them too much or at the wrong time. So the classic one is, if I'm doing a lesson on a rear wheel lift or a manual, like a technical maneuver that might be quite difficult for the student, I see a lot of instructors and coaches just falling into the habit of lots of technical feedback. But really, the information isn't that complicated. You've got the few bullet points for each maneuver, and beyond that, it is mileage, repetition. And that's where I start to be a bit more of a general good effort, keep going, kind of that mental, fluffy, positive feedback, just to keep them feeling good. Because especially if you're learning manuals, it can get pretty demoralizing sometimes. Sometimes you get worse, right? So the technical feedback isn't going to help, right? Cool. I'm just reading Abby's comment here. I think about. Yeah, cool. So I think sometimes the feedback that students have is relative to their learning style, their personality types, but also their situation. Like, I do get people that come for lessons, and partly the motivation is, I've paid for this lesson, so just tell me how it is. I want the information straight away, and I don't want to waste time. Especially Australians. I think Australians seem to be a bit more open to that. They almost kind of want you to tell them that they're doing really bad. I had an Australian surf instructor just tell me I was shit for 2 hours, and to give it another go. Didn't really get any technical feedback, just kind of gave me a hard time at being rubbish. And jokes aside, as a coach, I kind of found it really interesting, because I was like, he's not really giving me any technical information, but he's making me laugh because he's kind of just being mean to me. And it kept me in a really good spirit, because it was really hard and I was really rubbish at it. When I reflect back, I was kind of initially thought, well, he wasn't a very good coach. But then I reflect back and I think, well, mentally, he kept me in a pretty good place for the 2 hours that I was basically sucking at surfing. And really, the technical feedback, I mean, stand up, put your foot there. There wasn't really a lot to teach me other than just do it again and stand up this time. So Interesting. More specific feedback works well for me when my energy and stoke levels are higher. Yeah, I think energy and focus and motivation. I think Abby used the word motivation. Those are three really good words: energy, focus, and motivation. If you see that, you hear that in your students, that's where that technical specific feedback is going to land and have more impact. They're tired, they're not motivated, they don't have that focus, then vice versa, that's where that positive sandwich might be more helpful. All right, good stuff. Let's keep moving on unless we have any other questions. All good? Okie dokie team. So coaching with a solution-focused approach. So the feed-forward model. So it does sound kind of silly. I get that. But the one thing I've really changed in my coaching approach and my feed-forward the last year or so is I've just kind of deleted the word feedback and swapped it for feed-forward, and really focused on not saying what I see, but saying what we'd like to see. So what we want to talk about is the future version of yourself. We don't want to talk about the current version of yourself, because invariably you're going to end up talking about the flaws and the mistakes. Whereas if we focus on that future version of yourself, we're going to naturally start talking about ways to solve the problem and how to do it better, or how to perform more smoothly. So that's the nice thing about the feed-forward model, is it just shifts your attention from what you're doing wrong to what do we need to change. And often that helps us get into one clear focus. So a good example might be a student climbing up a technical climb, and this is pretty common, but they'll tend to rely on maybe just too much speed through pedaling, and they're not relying on the finesse of a bit of balance and a bit more power. So essentially they're kind of, from dirt bike terms, they're kind of sitting down and just using the throttle. Whereas really, if you're on a trials bike, you know, you want to be standing up, unweighting and moving on the bike, and then just using the throttle as and when you need it. So in that scenario, its feedback would be your gear's too easy, you're relying too much on the pedaling to get up that technical section. Feed-forward model would be, all right, great effort, let's try one harder gear and focus on unweighting the bike over the bumps so that the bike keeps momentum as you're going up the technical climb. Here, I'll show you. So what I find is the feed-forward model puts me into a bit more of a, it feels a lot more like another explanation. And I try and train coaches to use the tools we already have. So feedback is just, oh, there you go, feedback. Feed-forward is just another explanation, right? What are we going to try, why, and how? And then what do we do after explanations? We demonstrate. So what, why, how, show. And a lot of the feed-forward, what I like about it is it invites that opportunity for the instructor to jump in and set the ideal outcome visually. So the what, why, how, a little bit of explanation, but it really quickly gets the coach into the mindset of, hey, I'll just tell you what to focus on next time, but hey, why didn't you just watch me and then try this? Hey, I want you to look for the gear choice that I have, and I want you to look for me just sort of moving up and letting the bike move underneath me as I go up this technical climb. So feed-forward, a lot more solution focused, and really swaps you from what are we doing wrong to, hey, let's see what we can change to get a better outcome. I think the key thing with the why, if we just isolate that for a second, when people give feedback, shit, I keep saying it. Feed forward. And I'm sure you've all done this yourselves. Same for me, I'm guilty of it, is it's very easy just to focus on the what, right? So if we pick another example, riding downhill, coming through a corner, knees are a little bit into the frame, and maybe they're mostly centered, but their legs are just a little bit collapsed. They're not strong. They don't have these stacked bones. So when they go through the berm, they do tend to get kind of compressed into the back seat a little bit. So that's the classic, you know, saying what we're seeing. So if we apply this feed forward model, you know what to do. Hey, try and drop the heels and stack your legs so they're stronger through the berm. Okay, cool. Here, I'll show you. So feed forward, especially when we're trying to be concise and precise, it's quite easy just to tell them the what and then show them. But the reason why we don't want to miss the why is the reason why we have whys in our original explanations. So just quickly, anyone, just remind the group, why do we need whys? I'll pick on John because you're on the top of my screen. So,
well, I mean, I guess it kind of improves engagement if they understand the reason why they're doing this thing. It's not just because my coach said so. It's like, oh, I can connect that to the goal I've already established. You know.
Yeah, the connection piece is key. The understanding is key, and often I think of the why as selling the reason for the change. You know, inherently people don't like change. If I'm so used to sort of pinching my knees together and having my knees a little bit bent through berms, and I've done that for a long time, chances are that feels quite normal and somewhat comfortable for that rider. So to convince them to change it, we need to be a bit of a salesperson. So the why helps connect the technique with the outcome. It helps improve the mental component because it gives us a reason to try it. So there's a trust and confidence element in there because I know why I'm going to try and make that change. And really that speaks to I think Patrick says there, like it speaks to the benefit. You know, if I drop the heels and I stack my legs a little more, we're not going to get so tired and you won't collapse back. You're going to have better grip and stability through returns from one to the next. So, hey, let me show you. Let's give it a try, right? So the what, why, how. Sometimes in feed forward, like the how can be explained through the what. It can also be explained through just showing them in the demo. So just be aware of that. And sometimes the how you can kind of leave it in your pocket and maybe bring that out on the next section of trail, or let them practice a few times. And then if they need more of the how, then we can unpack that and dig it. So what, why, how, and then show. So we talked about the why, connects the change to the outcome. And if we can highlight the outcome as more control, more safety, more efficiency, smoother, those are all kind of nice selling points, right? Like if I'm a rider and you tell me, hey, if you try this, it won't be so scary. You'll feel safer. It will feel smoother. I'll be like, okay, cool. All right. Well, I felt kind of smooth already, but if you're telling me it's even smoother, then that sounds great. And that will all kind of link back to this mental component. And that's the other reason why the why helps. And those two together really makes the feedback sustainable. So I think of sustainable feed forward as when I give information to my student, will it stick? Will it make a change? And if I'm using a what, why, how show, and I'm focused on the solution and not the problem, that's where that information, call it feed forward or whatever you want, it tends to be a lot more sustainable. It sticks. And that's where, for us as coaches, we have to remember, if they're not doing it yet, it's often because it's not, how do I say this? So I get my tongue twist it up. Often it's not because they don't understand. It just takes time to make that technical, tactical change in their writing. And so that's where our feed forward can just really kind of be pared down and just hit rinse and repeat, but keep it really concise and precise. Doing great. Keep the heels dropped. Hey, follow me on this next corner. And then we can often talk about the outcomes, like we just mentioned. Hey, if you keep doing this, you'll feel a bit more front end grip, and you'll feel like the corner will want to push you out, and you'll actually get free acceleration from the corners if you don't let your legs collapse. You'll kind of brace against the forces, and it's like free speed. It's so much fun. Hey, watch me on the next few turns. So even though we've just spent the last few minutes talking about why this feed-forward solution-focused model has a lot of benefits to it, I like to play devil's advocate, and I often like to sort of flip things around and do a 180 degree, because that's coaching and that's humans. So question to you all, when might we need to not do feed forward? We actually want to do feedback. We want to say what we see, and we do want to highlight an issue, a deficiency, a problem, whatever language you want to use. Any thoughts? Don't be shy. Safety concerns? Yes, that's the big one. Yes, if there's something immediate, risk, safety, sometimes the best way to shut that down is stop doing that. We need to be comfortable as coaches, especially in mountain bike coaching, to be like, whoa, 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 stop. Let's just hit a pause here. Maybe I've missed, and often I'll encourage the coaches to put it on themselves, so then the student doesn't feel bad or awkward, but like, hey, whoa, sorry team, I've maybe missed this. Let me just re-explain it. We don't want to be doing A or B. We want to be doing C, because C will give us more confidence, feel smoother, a lot more safer. Here, let me just re-explain it. I'll re-show it to you, right? So if we do need to do that for safety concerns, great. Bring in that kind of past problem-focused feedback, but you can still do it without being negative. So there's a difference between being negative and just explaining what's happening. For example, if I use that example that we had, oh, your weight's really far back in the corners. It looks horrible. You're all squirrely, right? Versus right now, your weight's a bit behind center. That's causing a bit less grip on the front wheel. So let's see what we can do to adjust that and find some solutions, right? So again, it's the lens that we're looking through, whether we're looking through a feedback lens or a feed-forward lens. We can still always be respectful, and we can still always be positive or neutral at the very least. And that's where, again, playing devil's advocate here and doing a bit of a 180 U-turn, that's where feedback and problem-based feedback can get a bad rap, because really there are some other times where highlighting a problem is important. So beyond safety risks, what are some other opportunities or scenarios where highlighting the quote-unquote problem is actually more effective? Oh, run into this with more advanced riders. Angel, maybe you can explain that. I run into this with more advanced riders.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so the reason I say that is because I'm getting more advanced riders that they want to get into doing bigger drops or bigger jumps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And trying to use the feed forward method, and trying to be positive with it. Again, they're not quite understanding or getting that little small nugget that I'm trying to relate to them. So I got to revert back to going back to digging into that feedback portion of it.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's key is sometimes to build and progress, we need to do a bit of renovations. You know, it's like you can't just put new drywall on rotten studs, right? You've got to pull the studs out, put new studs in, and then you can put new drywall on, right? So we can't, sometimes we can't just paint over the issue, right? So to your point there, I think problem solving is very important when, if we don't see any immediate progression and we just kind of hit a brick wall, and or the deficiency, the skill deficiency or the issue is too fundamental that we actually need to bring more awareness to it and we need to stop it or change it or whatever it is, that there is value in just highlighting, you know, what that is, why it's not helping, and then to shift that back to a future focused approach. Well, now how can we change things, right? But awareness is key, and sometimes if it's small, we can just focus on the solution, because often the solution is the same as the problem, you've just said it in a different way. And that's the key here. Like if if the student's in the back seat, we can say, you're in the back seat, or you can just say, you're looking great. Let's try and keep our legs more stacked and our chin over stem so we're a bit more centered. So we've highlighted the problem through suggesting the solution. The challenge might be if there's something else more fundamental that's an issue. So if they're standing on their toes a lot, the cleats are too far forward, or maybe they got flat pedals and they're just standing far too much on their toes, they can't drop their heels. I'm going to need to highlight that and change that before I can then get them to focus on dropping the heels, stacking their legs, being a bit more centered and stable through the turn. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Cool. Love it. Okay. Struggling to break habits and safety. To summarize that, I would say struggling to break bad habits and safety concerns is generally a time to sort of look at that feedback but still, ask the question: Can I highlight this in a way that's still solution focused, rather than just saying everything that they're doing wrong? So a lot of this is just, in a way, it's a sales pitch, and a good salesperson, if any of you have worked in sales, it's crazy. I had a job years ago in sales, and it was amazing what I learned with saying the same thing in a different way to create the sale. It's a pretty cool, because that's all I think coaching is. It's language, and it's, in a way, it's an art form, and it's a mastery of language and a mastery of words to explain the same thing in different ways. But if I'm going into it with this idea of what's the solution rather than what's the problem, that's going to help me pick all those words and that language that will be a bit more constructive. Cool. So sharpening your eye for technique. So if we get a bit of time here, I'll kind of go through a few things and we can watch a couple of videos. But we talked a lot about the talking part of feed forward. Is the things that we say. We want to focus on talking about the things we would like to see rather than talking too much about the things we are seeing. So sharpening your eye for technique, building effective rider analysis. So one of the common things I see is, I'll just highlight these first three pretty quickly here, is when we're analyzing a student, we tend to naturally go to the body and chin over stem, elbows out, hips on the seat, whatever the cadence, whatever it might be. Just reminding yourself that we've got a few different things we can use when we're analyzing a rider. And when I'm analyzing the body, try and get into a habit of head to toe or toe to head. And for me, the foundation on a bike, especially when I'm going downhill, is feet up. So I've seen so many coaches focusing on chin over stem, elbows out. That's great. They look fairly centered on the bike, little hinge at the waist, but the foot position is off. Why is the foot position off? They're standing on their toes too much or not enough. The cleats are in an awkward place. if you can refine that foot position over the pedals, especially for beginner to intermediate riders and even advanced riders that are riding clipped in too early and their cleats are too far forward on the shoes, so they're on their tippy toes anytime they stand up. Doesn't really matter talking about the chin over stem or hinging at the waist or neutral to relax or get a little bit lower to be more active. It all starts from the bottom. So when you're analyzing technique, you know, try and use that scanning idea of like bottom to the top or top to the bottom. It can depend on the viewpoint that you have on the rider and how far away they are. But that's just one tool I use to sort of think about, you know, if I'm teaching body position for descending, more often than not, I'm starting from the feet and going up to the head. So just a quick scan. And then I think about the bullet points that I've asked them to do, and I look for that. So I've just said pedals level, tall and relaxed, chin over stem. And a lot of the time in these lessons, you know, a lot of the bullet points too is going to be foot position with your pedals level, chin over stem, tall and relaxed. So I'm kind of reminding myself of those 2 or 3 bullet points as I'm analyzing the rider. And it seems such a simple thing to do, but it's something a lot of coaches miss, is they'll tend to explain something and then watch, but then try and watch for everything, or not in their head actually have the little menu of the 2 or 3 things I'm actually trying to look for. And as soon as you start doing that, your analysis skills are far more on point. And then because of that, the feed forward, the information you say to your student is a lot more concise and precise. If you look for specific things, you'll see specific things, and then the feed forward will be specific. So that's one idea. Looking at the dirt, so that sounds weird, but for me, I look at where the bike is on the trail. And I'll show you a couple of videos quickly in a minute, but sometimes the body position's good, the braking's good, you know, kind of the rider on the bike, there's not an obviously glaring thing that I can highlight to improve their riding based on their speed and experience. But when I look at their line choice and I look at where the tires are on the dirt, or I can listen to the tires, when are they skidding, when are they not skidding, I'm trying to listen to the bike over the dirt. Those things start giving me more information. So anytime you're watching a student, especially if it's a good student, and you look at their technique and you're like, oh, they're kind of good. Well, you know what? Let's look at something else. Let's look at the bike on the trail. Let's look at where they are on the dirt. Let's listen to the dirt. Maybe that will give me some more cues for my analysis to come up with some information to help keep them progressing. And that's where that kind of, you know, body dirt bike analysis process comes in, is it's just a little reminder that we don't always have to look at the body. Cause and effect we touched on before, but it's just a little reminder that if you see something, you know, is there something, we tend to see the symptoms, is there something underlying that's more fundamental? And that will help you prioritize the skill to highlight, because we might see 2 or 3 different things, but we want to prioritize to the one that's limiting the performance the most. And what's that going to be a lot of the time? What skill? This is a quick test. Stability and balance. You know, when you're teaching direction control, leaning the bike, most of the time the feedback is a stability issue, or a range of movement issue. When you're teaching pumping, it will go back to stability and balance. Like, that's why 90% of the time, even if we're teaching those other skills, there's still a theme, there's a constant theme of analysis through stability and balance, and their position over the bike. The other thing to look for when we're giving feedback is this guy here. So being a bit more holistic. So I'll give you a little scenario of drops. When you're watching a student come off a drop, there's a number of different things that will create better performance and success. One of them is technique. The other one is speed. and the other one is terrain. So there's lots of different ways to impact performance, but speed, terrain, and technique are key. And speed is often the easiest thing to change, to improve or make something smoother for a student, particularly for like run-ins into drops. If they're going too fast, it's harder. If they're going too slow, it's harder. And then because it's harder, their technique's not as smooth. And I've seen this time and time again where coaches are giving feedback and all this technical feedback, when really if we just zoom out, go a little bit more holistic, and remember that there's 6 pillars of coaching and social guiding, teaching, writing, mental skills, and equipment. You know, we've got these kind of writing skills, mental skills, and equipment skills that all build into making my writing more successful or not. And part of that is the tactical element to it, right? So I could just give all this feedback on when to press and absorb, or when to poke off a drop, or I could just say, doing great, but why don't you start further back up the trail? Come in with a touch more speed. You were doing a 4, let's maybe do a 5 out of 10. We always want to quantify the speed so it's safe and objective. Let's try that. I'll quickly show you, right? And that's where future focused solution feedback, it doesn't always have to be this uber technical thing with body movements and biomechanics and timing. It could just be something simple as speed. Cornering's a good example. Hey, just come in, and if you come in with a touch more speed, leaning in will feel a lot more comfortable. If you're not sure what speed, you're doing a 3, let's do a 4.5. Follow me, try and stay on my tail. I'm not going to go fast. I'm going to go at a nice speed for you. And let's see how just adjusting that speed helps the technique we've been talking about. So in terms of sharpening your eye for technique, take that word technique and just sort of zoom out from it and apply it to technique. Also means my setup, my speed for things. It also means the terrain I'm using. Sometimes it's not the technique or the speed, it's just the terrain's kind of horrible. It's too awkward, it's too difficult. Let's try and find somewhere else where we can practice the exact same thing and see if we have more success. Particularly in hand-built trails or skills areas that haven't been designed super well. It can be, you all know it, it's super hard teaching on the things that haven't been built quite right. And the student can get frustrated. The coach can get frustrated. And I've been in that situation a number of times, and I've just said, hey, you know what? This drop sucks. We don't need to learn this drop. You're having a hard time, not because you don't get it, but this drop is particularly difficult, or this technical climb is really tricky, you know, especially on the conditions today. It's a little slippery. So why don't we just go and practice the same thing, but change the terrain and see if we have more success? So analysis and solutions isn't always about the core technique. It can be about the terrain or the speed. So just that little bit more holistic approach to your eye and your solution finding can really make a more positive outcome for you and your students. Compare ideal versus real movement patterns, observe, and collaborate. So in terms of sharpening your eye, one of the best things you can do is watch a lot of videos of different riders doing the same corner, or different riders riding the same trail. Film yourself versus someone else. I mean, the good news is we live in a media world now where it's mountain bike videos and techniques are brilliant. And if the information's dodgy, you can always just hit mute and watch the video yourself. But one thing I really encourage coaches to do is take a video, take the 6 riding skills, and if you want to sharpen your eye, pick a skill, just one skill, and then pick some key bullet points to look for whilst you're watching that video. It could be anything. It could be a nice anthill bike movie. It could be a Brandon Semenak section. It could be a women's cross-country race from a World Cup, whatever you want to watch. but watch it, maybe like a 3-minute loop or 2-minute loop. And let's say you're watching pressure control. So what are the bullet points to describe pressure control to a child? Well, if I want to assess somebody's ability to pump and unweight the bike, I want to see the bike get heavy and light. I want to see them push and pull. I want to see their head and their mass go down and up. I'm going to write down a few bullet points of what I'm looking for as if I was trying to explain it to a kid. And then I watch the video and I literally look for those 2 or 3 bullet points. And that's a fantastic way to train your brain and sharpen your eye. And you're not teaching. You can literally do this tonight on your laptop. Rinse and repeat for direction control. You know, watch some old Steve Pete videos because he's tall. He's got fantastic technique. So because he's tall, it really highlights his angulation and rotation skills. So rotation, belly button pointing across the top tube into the direction of the turn. If there was laser beams coming out of his knees and his belly button, they'd all be pointing into the turn more than the laser beam coming out of the head tube of the bike. And then I'll watch that video. I'll hit pause, play, and I'll start trying to burn in my mind the ideal image for that specific technical skill. And then when I'm out there on the trail and I'm watching my riders, that compare and contrast happens so much more quickly because my eye of the ideal is so much more accurate. And that's where coaches struggle to, first of all, see the analysis, but then because of that, come up with a solution for improvement. Because the other thing with feed forward and solution focused feedback is it's not about someone's writing always being wrong. And we'll watch a video in a minute where pretty much everything's fine, but how can we improve? So we've got to learn to look through a lens of not just always looking for something to correct, but looking for something to do even better, to ask them to execute it faster or smoother or with more style or more consistently. So there's 2 lenses with our analysis. And when we teach beginner to intermediate riders, it's very easy to fall into the habit of anytime I analyze, I'm looking for things to kind of address and correct, right? As much as we don't use that language, that's kind of what's happening in our head as coaches. Oh, there's an issue I need to fix so that we don't have that issue anymore. Whereas with intermediate up, a lot of the time, especially advanced expert riders, and people have a challenge on this in the level 4s, they keep looking for things to fix, but there's nothing to fix. And so because of that, the analysis and feedback process stops, and then the learning and skill development stops. But if I switch that lens to, wow, they're really good, but what could they do even better? All of a sudden I start seeing things because I'm so used to watching pros do it. The more I watch pros do it, the more I can see things in advanced expert riders in terms of what they can still get better at. Because there's a big difference between your average advanced expert rider and a pro. There's still a massive difference there. Just as there's a big difference between a beginner and an intermediate rider, right? So just some quick tools there to talk about in terms of how we sharpen our eye for technique. So if you have time, I know we've kind of gone over time a little bit, but I thought I might just show you a couple of videos and we'll see if this works. I'm just going to swap the screen here to showing something else. There we go. Any questions before we crack on? Thoughts, comments? All good? Woohoo. Okay, lovely jubbly. So we'll just watch a couple here. I don't know how well you can see this, so I'll try and zoom in. Is that doable? That work? We don't need to see the details here too much, but I just want to show you something interesting. So this was on a course in the summer, and this is one lady coming down. She's shredding. She started mountain biking at 60. I think she's now 70. So just, you know, if I'm future focused, Doing great. To keep the chin over the stem, let's keep the elbows out. Let's try and keep the hips a little more over the seat. The outcome of that is you'll feel more pressure in your hands pushing down into the bars, so you'll have more front wheel grip. Let's go find an easier turn where I can show you this and you can try it, because this is actually quite a difficult turn. So really solution focused there. This was a habit that's just ingrained and nothing's sinking in. You know, I might choose to show this video and say, hey, you're doing really well today. Let's just look at the issue here that we're excited to change. So you can see the knees are bent, the hips have dropped over the rear hub. You see the elbows have dropped. And those two things are causing us to get a little bit in the back seat here. So that's the thing that we can still ride smoothly like that, but that's the thing we're trying to address. So the solution for that is A, B, and C. You can see how it impacts her exit too, because that body position makes it harder for her to steer smoothly for the second half of the turn. It's the same turn. Turn my brightness up. What's the first thing you notice with this rider? She's come in, but if we look at bike, dirt, or body, you know, if you pick one of those things, what's something you notice there versus where's the bike?
Closer towards the inside.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Kim. So if I'm only ever focused on analyzing body position, which is a very easy trap to fall into, I'm going to miss one of the biggest tools that makes cornering easier and more fun, which is your entry point.
Mm-hmm.
This lady's pretty low. This is a tight hairpin berm. And then this lady just comes out wide and straight away has made this corner bigger. So similar body position things that we can address, but less so, looking more centered and more stacked. But because the line choice was different, because I changed my analysis from not just the body, but the bike, I started to see different things. And then, so what do you think the first piece of feedback was that I gave this rider? Was it the body position?
Line choice.
Yeah, because if I can change the line choice, first of all, that's a much easier change. So that's great for the mental side to things. If we can create an impact with less effort, then let's do that one first, right? Also, the body position issues weren't significant enough that she wasn't in control. So there's no real risk there at this moment at the speed or the terrain that we're on. So let's just pause on that. Let's give some feedback that we know we can change straight away and go from there. And the other thing too is if you open up the turn, you make it rounder, chances are she's going to feel more comfortable to hold a better position on the bike anyway, right? So again, not right or wrong. It's just hopefully trying to get this lens that we're looking through and swapping between different lenses. Are we looking at the body? Are we looking at the bike? Are we looking at the dirt? What are some things here that we can change that we look at? So here's another one I wanted to show you. This is actually my kid. Okay, so I won't say anything, but maybe one of you, if you're feeling confident, just tell me what, if you were the coach, thinking of a solution-focused feed-forward approach, what would you say to Huxley here? And with slow-mo, so that helps. Who wants to jump in? See your dad for coaching advice. Doesn't always work. They don't listen to me. It's funny. They will listen to all the coaches that work for me, but they won't listen to me. But I guess that's dad life. And then they get surprised when they find out that like I trained their coach. They're like, "Oh, you trained my coach? Oh, wow." But anyway, I digress. Who wants to jump in?
I was just going to mention what I see the landing is a little bit stiff. I might do something to activate some muscle tension, thinking about the joints, like the ankles, the knees, and where the femur comes into the hip socket, where we can actually have a little more active muscle tension to absorb.
Okay, so what you're describing there, Brenda, is an outcome of something else. So we're at the moment you're describing a symptom, but what's the cause? So just training your eye, press, absorb, poke, and then whenever I'm teaching drops, I'm looking for those movements with the right timing. So my analysis is based off the things I've told my students. Press, absorb, poke when at his speed, because there's always speed and distance. At his speed, it's about one slap before the front wheel leaves the drop. And you need to do a good press and absorb because you don't weigh anything. Like Huxley's, I think he's about 50, 60 pounds in this, so 70 pounds. So I've just said that to my student. So I'm going to watch for that. Press, absorb, poke, a good strong press and absorb. Actually put energy into the bike because he doesn't weigh anything. And execute that just before the front wheel leaves the drop. So now analyze it. So when did he start the press absorb?
Too early.
Too early. Yeah. And you can see, because he was a touch too early, he should be off. If he was off the drop at this point, it would have been gold, but he's not. Now he's off the drop, and now the rear wheels had time to get weighted and start pitching him forward. I mean, it's only tiny. I mean, this is kind of an ideal outcome for teaching drops. You want to get to a point where there's a small margin of error and the rider's good enough that it doesn't have to be perfect and they'll still be fine. So we're describing everything we're seeing. So that happens in my head. So the habit we need to get into as coaches is to not say what we're seeing. That's just all internal. So what I'll say to Huxley is, doing good, buddy. That was a nice drop. Next time, try your move a little later. Just be patient. Here, let me show you. And so the outcome of that was this one. I'll zoom in a bit just so you guys can see it a little bit better.
Boom.
Yeah. Especially for kids, you know, just treat adults like kids. Concise and precise feedback. Great job. Be patient. Press and absorb a bit later. That's your solution. Go try it. I even say that, like, here's your solution. I want you to drop your heels more. Oh, okay, cool. Even just saying this is a solution, it's going to help the sale. Like, you know, why will this help? Wow, your legs won't collapse. You won't get so tired. And then we can do 3 more laps today. Explanations are the same as feed forward or any kind of feedback. They can all get wrapped into too much complexity. And that is the trap of every instructor and coach on this planet. How do you make something complex simple? Bullet points, need to knows, and layers. Let's just start with the first layer. Hey, be patient. Don't do the move so early. Let's go. All right. Here's another one. Which one should I pick? Oh, yeah. Is this the right one? Oh, sorry, I'll just skip that back. What's your thoughts? Do you see anything that needs fixing?
It was hard to tell, you know, like without knowing the trail, but like my initial gut instinct was that had the vision. It looked like the rider was looking down more.
Yeah,
But
so this would be my strategy for improving your analysis. Don't look for stuff that doesn't exist. Don't be overly critical. I mean, he's having a good time, right? Chin's over stem, bike's moving around. He's very active. He's bouncing around. He's using some pressure control. The trail's obviously rough and technical. So, and this is really common, is if we don't see it, we try and dig. We get the spade out and we start digging for something. Like, just leave it alone. So what I like to do is change from something to fix and how to improve. So I'm going to show you the next video. Oh, go away. I don't want that. And then I think we'll start wrapping it up here. But if I just show you this for comparison, comparison is one of the best tools you have to develop your eye for technique. What do you see in that rider?
Less fluid.
Interesting.
I think that rider was just a little calmer.
Yeah. In a way, she's more fluid because she's using less effort. And she's just flowing down the trail, right? So the feedback to her might be, you're looking really nice, you know? Use that relaxed stance that you have on the bike to occasionally try and unweight the bike, you know? Why? It might just help smooth out some of the roots and rocks, but you're looking great. Just keep doing what you're doing. I love the position and I love the flow, all right? If I go back to this guy, my feed forward, you can't get break old habits. You see, this is the whole thing. We've got to break these habits. But my feed forward would be, love the energy, great stability on the bike. To find more flow, try and land quietly and softly, and try and find pockets that when you land, there's a gradient. So you maintain the playfulness, but try and smooth out that playfulness. Because there's no issues to fix there. That's just something he can improve, right? Especially for level 2, level 3, level 4 levels for coaching, you have to look through that lens of what can we polish, probably more than through the lens of what do we need to fix. And apart from anything else, that will take you into a place with your own writing that will just bring more awareness. Bring more awareness into how you move and the variety in your own techniques and skills. And writing becomes less about right and wrong and a lot more about cause and effect, pros and cons. So here's me doing something through a turn. Just kind of take a snapshot of that in your head for a second. What's the difference?
All of your arms are straight.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which one's right and which one's wrong?
There's no right or wrong.
Well done. He passed the test. Good. It was a trick question. It depends on what do I want. Am I tired? Am I going through this turn, and do I want to save energy? Am I going slower? Am I going faster? Is the berm steep enough that I can just lean and stack my bones and stay tall? I've been in this position. Oh, not that one. No, that's Ross. So I definitely haven't been in his position. He's too short. So I've been in that position through like a really big high-speed berm coming into a big jump. I mean, you can see here, it's a very mellow blue berm, right? I'm not going fast. So just in terms of developing your eye for analysis, going back to compare the ideal versus the real, comparing the ideal means comparing the ideal in multiple situations, multiple scenarios. There isn't one way of riding. And I think the art of mountain bike coaching is constantly gaining a better understanding of when and how much. When do I do A? When do I do B? And how much in that situation do I do A or B? And then when do I blend A and B? And it's getting away from the kind of binary view of techniques, this one or that one. And a lot of the time it's a combination of, and then it's a ratio of when and how much. So a good example is angulation and inclination. So here you can see I'm mostly just leaning the bike with the body. There's not a lot of separation. There's not a lot of disconnect. But there's still some. Whereas I think in this one, I'm in a different position. I'm a lot lower, but it's the same amount of inclination, right? So it's, for me, you know, most corners will start with leaning the bike a little bit underneath you, and then if it's a berm, you can lean the body more in, and every turn has inclination, and every turn has some angulation. I don't like those technical terms, but basically every turn requires you to disconnect and lean the bike underneath you a little bit. Flatter turns, you need to disconnect and lean the bike underneath you a lot more than berms, which allow you to stay more connected. But every turn has both, and it's just when and how much. And understanding those technical components is key for your analysis, which is key for your genuine skill development and key for your problem solving and solution finding. And often the solution finding is not trying to fix something that's broke, but trying to do something even better, especially beyond that level 1 coach phase. So I love this kind of stuff. I could literally talk about this stuff all night, but we've already gone over time, so I'm not going to do that. We're going to wrap it up there with just any questions, comments, or feedback.